Did you ever feel like a stranger in your own home? For 30 years, that was my life. Growing up in a wealthy family, I was never truly a part of them. To my adoptive parents, I was an obligation, an existence they accepted, but never loved. I learned to live with that coldness, building a defensive wall for myself. I thought I would live that way forever, but everything changed on a fateful Thanksgiving evening. An argument, a cruel word that tore down the veil of a secret, and a belated confession led me to an old wooden box. Inside were a photograph and a silver compass necklace. They belonged to Callista, my birth mother. Why did she abandon me? Why did my adoptive family receive a large sum of money to keep me a secret, and the powerful woman running a financial empire in Denver? Had she really been looking for me? Or had she forgotten me for 30 years? I, an officer trained to believe only in verifiable truths, now had to embark on the most personal mission of my life. But would the truth set me free? Or was it just another, more elaborate trap, laid long ago? I am Major Ronan, an armor officer in the U.S. Army. In my world, everything is defined by coordinates and orders. Every target has a clear grid coordinate. Every mission has a precise chain of command. But that map and order system only works inside the steel fence of Joint Base Lewis McChord. When I drove home to Bellevue, I was entering unmapped territory where I became an anomaly, an unmarked coordinate. That was the home of Cassian and Alara, my adoptive parents. For 3 decades, it was never a home, just a temporary base, clean, expensive, and soulless. Cassian, my adoptive father, was always behind a financial newspaper as if my presence had no bearing on the market fluctuations he was monitoring. Alara, my adoptive mother, would just pass by with a social nod, the kind she might give to any gardener, and their 2 children, Dashiell and Cressida, always looked at me with a mix of pity and annoyance, as if my presence was an uncomfortable reminder of an obligation their parents reluctantly fulfilled. When I was young, I used to try to understand. Now, looking back with the experience of an officer, I could clearly see the holes in the story they created about a young mother who died in an accident. But back then, all I knew was that I would never get the real answers. So, I stopped asking. Instead, I adapted. I learned to not need them, not their warmth, not their answers. My goal changed. From seeking acceptance to seeking independence. It wasn't just about survival. It was about self-reliance. And I did that by joining the military. Discipline. Clear orders. Long overseas missions only widened the distance. I still sent money back regularly, like a soldier supplying the home front. The return emails, if any, were as brief as a status report. Everything's fine, stay safe. End of message. My rare leaves were when I truly came home. But that home was not in Bellevue. It was a small cabin in the Cascade Mountains, where Ansel Cassian's father lived in near seclusion. Ansel was the only person who looked me straight in the eye when he spoke. And in his eyes, I always saw it. A genuine affection. But hidden behind it was a sense of torment, a guilt I couldn't name. The look of an old soldier guarding a secret outpost, knowing its importance, but also weary from the burden of the watch. He never revealed anything, and I, with the respect of an officer, never asked. But I knew his torment and the mystery of my life were one and the same, and I was just waiting for the day that secret order would be decrypted. Waiting in the military is not a passive act. You fortify your position, maintain your equipment, prepare for the next command. That's exactly what I did. But sometimes, to break a stalemate, you have to conduct a reconnaissance yourself. And that reconnaissance took place on Thanksgiving this year. I was on unexpected leave. A thought flashed in my head, not hope, but a calculated test. A final attempt to pinpoint my position in this so-called family. I decided to prepare dinner myself. I went shopping, selected each spice, meticulously planned each dish. While cleaning the potatoes, the cold water on my hands made me shiver involuntarily. A memory of a summer afternoon, when I was 12, rushed back so vivid it hurt. That day, Dashiell and I were cycling together. A car suddenly sped out from a bend, and I didn't have time to react. The impact wasn't too hard, but it was enough to send me tumbling onto the road. The bicycle was bent, and my knee was torn open, bleeding profusely. Dashiell, although he didn't fall, was so scared he burst into tears. The driver quickly stopped, apologized profusely, and called my family. I sat there, holding my knee, waiting. A moment later, Cassian and Alara's car pulled up. As soon as the car stopped, Alara rushed out. Her eyes scanned past me, who was sitting on the ground, knee covered in blood, and landed on Dashiell, who was standing nearby, sobbing. Without a second of hesitation, she ran straight to Dashiell. "Oh, my son, are you okay? Are you scared?" She hugged him tightly, checking him from head to toe, as if he were the one who had been injured. Cassian walked over to me. He didn't ask if I was in pain. He looked at the broken bicycle, then looked down at my knee. "More trouble?" He sighed, his voice full of annoyance. "Be more careful next time." They took me to the hospital. The entire ride, Alara just sat in the back seat comforting Dashiell. I sat in the front seat, next to Cassian, silent, trying to hold back tears not from pain, but from humiliation. While waiting, I vaguely heard Alara say to Cassian on the phone, "It's a good thing it wasn't Dashiell. If anything had happened to him, I don't think I could have survived." I shook my head, pushing the memory away and focusing on the preparations. Perhaps it was because of moments like that I wanted this dinner to be perfect, a hopeless effort to prove that I too deserved care, just for once. As the smell of roasted turkey began to fill the large kitchen, Cressida walked by. "Oh," she sneered, her eyes sweeping over the carefully set dining table. "Look who's trying to pretend to be part of this family." I ignored her. The provocation was too trivial. But Dashiell, coming downstairs, wasn't. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said directly, "Stop pretending. Everyone knows you're just a charity case." The sound of the knife chopping vegetables in my hands stopped. A heavy silence spread through the kitchen. I slowly put the knife down, turned around to face him. My voice was flat, without a hint of emotion. "Say that again, Dashiell." My calm demeanor seemed to anger him. He snapped, "I said you're a charity case. Didn't you hear? Or does the truth bother you?" The argument escalated quickly. That's when my adoptive parents walked in. Alara looked tired, as if this were just a minor nuisance interrupting her evening. But Cassian was different. He looked at me not with a father's eyes, but with a manager's who wanted to terminate a bad contract. "Enough," he growled, cutting everyone off. "We have fulfilled our responsibility to you for 30 years. You were just a burden we were forced to accept from the beginning." The voice wasn't loud, but it echoed throughout the house, tearing down every last layer of defense I had built for 3 decades. Silence. Then, as if nothing had happened, Alara turned to Cassian. "We're going to be late for the party." They casually turned and went upstairs to get dressed and left. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in the large house, between the cooling food and a harsh truth colder than the November wind outside. The reconnaissance had yielded results. My position was clearly defined, non-existent. The silence enveloped the house. The smell of roasted turkey began to feel suffocating. I stood motionless in the kitchen, Cassian's words still echoing in my ears. It wasn't pain, it was confirmation. A final mission report, clear and definitive. Just then I heard the familiar engine of an old pickup truck pulling into the driveway. It was Ansel. The door opened, letting in a rush of cold air. He walked in, not surprised by the silence in the house. He just looked at me, then at the dinner table set for no one. The torment was no longer in his eyes as usual. Now there was only determination, like a commander who had decided to break radio silence. "It's time, Ronan," he said, his voice hoarse. He slowly pulled out a chair and sat down, the heavy gesture of a man about to do something he had postponed his whole life. The silence lingered. Ansel intertwined his gnarled hands, looking down at them as if searching for the right words. 30 years ago, he began, his voice low and steady. "Your birth mother, Callista, was a strong girl, but she made a mistake. She trusted the wrong person. She fell in love with a scoundrel. He left your mother, and the baby in her belly." He looked up, his eyes haunted. "Her family didn't care about their daughter's broken heart. They only cared about their reputation. They disowned your mother. To them, that problem had to disappear, and that problem was you, Ronan." He told me about the tense family meetings, the threats, and the desperation of a young mother pushed to the wall. They left her no choice. "Then they came to me," he continued, his voice tinged with bitterness. "They knew Cassian was in trouble at the time. They offered a deal, a large sum of money, enough for my son to revive his business. In exchange, he and Alara would adopt you and keep this secret forever. I agreed. I thought at least you would have a home, a decent family. I thought that was the only way to protect both mother and child." He shook his head, slowly and with deep regret. "I promised to oversee, to make sure you were treated well. But I failed. I stayed silent for too long. I thought I was doing the right thing," he said, his voice almost choking up. "But I was wrong. Money can never replace love." He placed an old wooden box on the table. "I've kept it for 30 years. It belongs to you." My hands didn't tremble. I opened the box calmly. Inside were no letters, no papers. Just two things. A yellowed photograph. A young, beautiful woman with determined eyes, holding a newborn baby. Those eyes. I recognized them. The same look I saw in the mirror every morning. And a silver compass necklace, with a simple compass pendant. It was the same one I was wearing when I was given away. The final order had been decrypted. My coordinates had been found. I sat there, in the silence of the house, with only the ticking of the wall clock. The photograph and the necklace lay gently in my palm. They were not heavy, but I could feel the weight of 30 years. Ansel said nothing more. He had completed his mission. He just sat there, like an old soldier who had passed the flag to the next generation. I stood up, carefully placed the two relics back in the wooden box and put it in my jacket pocket. All my emotions, anger, pain, confusion, coalesced into one single thing: clarity. The truth didn't break me. It set me free. It explained everything. Ilara's coldness, Cassian's contempt, Dashiell and Cressida's pitying looks. I wasn't part of their family. I was a transaction, an investment they had been paid to make. And in their eyes, after 30 years, the contract had expired. Cassian's words weren't an insult in the heat of the moment. It was a financial summary. I looked at Ansel. "I need to go," I said. My voice was still steady. He just nodded, a wordless understanding. I didn't pack my bags. Nothing here truly belonged to me. I walked straight to the door. As my hand rested on the doorknob, I paused for a second, not out of hesitation, but to give myself one final order. I took out my phone, opened the banking app, and canceled the automatic transfer I had set up for Cassian every year. One click. Decisive. It was my official withdrawal from a front that was never worth fighting. I stepped outside, the cold November night air filling my lungs. It wasn't cold. It was fresh. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving behind the brightly lit but empty house. In the rearview mirror, I saw Ansel's silhouette still standing in the doorway. I didn't know where I was going, The compass in my pocket didn't point in any direction. But for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was leaving from. And that was enough. I drove all night, without a specific destination. The car was simply a tool to create distance from the place I had just left. I stopped at a roadside motel as dawn was breaking. The first thing I did wasn't to sleep. I opened my laptop. The new objective had a name: Callista. With that name and the city of Denver that Ansel had mentioned, I started my search. It didn't take long. Callista, a prominent name in Denver's financial world, the founder of a prestigious investment fund. There were many articles, interviews. I looked at the professional photos online, a powerful, confident woman with determined eyes. It was still those eyes. But now they no longer held the sadness from the yellowed photograph. I booked a plane ticket to Denver. The plan was in place. The flight landed in the afternoon. As I was waiting for a taxi outside the airport, a luxurious black sedan screeched to a halt right in front of me. The back door opened, and a man in a sophisticated suit stepped out. He was in his 50s, with features that resembled Callista's, but much colder and more calculating. "Major Ronan?" he asked, his tone not a question but an affirmation. I didn't answer. I just stood still, assessing the situation. "I'm your uncle," he said, as if that explained everything. "Callista's brother. I think we need to talk." He gestured toward the car. I didn't move. "We can talk here." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "As you wish." "I'm here to make an offer." A very generous offer. He opened his leather briefcase, took out a stack of documents and a pre-filled check. "This is a trust fund, established for you, and this is an additional sum, enough for you to live a comfortable life without having to do anything. You can go anywhere, do anything, just as long as you don't come to Denver. Don't look for Callista. Don't stir up a buried story." I looked at the numbers on the check. A very large sum. Enough to buy the silence of many. "Why?" I asked, my voice still flat. He sighed, as if explaining the obvious. "For the family's reputation. For Callista's peace. Your appearance will only bring trouble. Do you understand?" I understood. I understood very well. He wasn't here for Callista. He was here for himself, for the family. Callista probably didn't even know about this meeting. This was an attempt to clean up an old problem. And this man was the one behind it. I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not here for the money." With that, I turned, walked toward the waiting taxis, leaving him standing there with his check and his generous offer. The first obstacle had appeared, and it only made my goal clearer. Sitting in the taxi, I watched the city of Denver pass by. His offer didn't deter me. It only confirmed one thing. I was getting very close to the target, and they were starting to get scared. The taxi took me to downtown Denver. Instead of going to the hotel, I asked the driver to stop in front of a glass and steel skyscraper, where the logo of the investment fund Callista founded was displayed. I didn't call ahead. A direct confrontation would get me the fastest answer. I walked through the vast main lobby to the reception desk. The young woman looked up, smiling professionally. "How may I help you?" "I would like to see Miss Callista," I said. "I don't have an appointment." Her smile froze slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. Miss Callista's schedule is full today. Would you like to leave a message?" I took the silver compass necklace out of my pocket and placed it on the counter. The light in the lobby reflected off the old metal. "Please tell her that the person who has this is here. She will know." The receptionist looked at the necklace, then looked up at me. There was something in my demeanor that made her understand this wasn't a normal request. She nodded, picked up the internal phone, her voice hushed and cautious. A few minutes later, an older woman, probably an assistant, hurried out from the elevators. Her eyes stopped on the necklace, and the professionalism on her face broke for a moment. She nodded at me. "Please follow me." We took a private elevator up to the top floor. The door opened to a vast office with a panoramic view of the city and the Rocky Mountains in the distance. A woman was standing with her back to us looking out the window. When she turned around, time seemed to stand still. It was her, Callista, the face of the woman in the photograph, but now etched with the marks of time, of power, and of some deep, unspoken sadness that had never faded. She looked at me. Her eyes scanned my face, then settled on my eyes. The confidence of a CEO disappeared, replaced by shock, disbelief, and a fragile thread of hope. She didn't say my name. She couldn't have known my name. Is it you? She whispered, her voice trembling, almost inaudible. I stood there, silent, letting her question hang in the air. 30 years, I finally spoke. My voice wasn't a greeting. It was a demand for an explanation. Why? Callista flinched, as if she had just taken an invisible punch. Tears began to stream down her cheeks. I fell apart, she said, her voice breaking. When they took you away, a part of me died. For a long time, all my searches were hopeless. I couldn't do anything. But then I realized weakness would never bring you back. The only way to have hope of finding you was to become strong, to succeed, to have power, to have the connections to fight my own family. She stumbled toward a large safe hidden behind a painting. She opened it and took out a thick folder of documents. But they obstructed me, she said, placing the folder on the table. Here. She flipped through the pages. Are reports from the private detectives I hired for decades. All of them hit dead ends. My family used their power to erase every trace. Then she took out another legal document. And this, a large trust fund. I established it years ago. The only condition to activate it is for the heir who possesses the silver compass necklace to be found. She looked at me, her eyes now filled with desperation and sincerity. That was all I could do. Search in vain and prepare for a day I wasn't sure would ever come. She looked at the compass I was still holding in my hand. That was my grandfather's compass. I gave it to you, hoping that one day it would guide you back home. I looked at the evidence in front of me. My hand traced the yellowed pages of the private detective reports. Dead ends. Failures. I stopped at a legal document for the trust fund, with the activation clause tied to the necklace in my hand. These were not just empty words. This was proof of a war. I understood. She hadn't given up. She had fought a solitary war. A war she had almost lost. The confrontation had provided answers, but not what I had been prepared to hear, but what I had never dared to hope for. The defensive wall I had built for 30 years began to crack. I said nothing, just looked at the woman in front of me, my mother. For the first time, I truly saw her, not a name in the news, not a ghost from the past, but a mother who had fought a war I knew nothing about. The following days in Denver passed in a strange atmosphere, a mix of the awkwardness of strangers and an undeniable, unspoken connection. Callista wanted to make up for lost time. She wanted to give me everything. One evening, as we sat in her office, she offered me to leave the military. Stay here, Ronan, she said, her voice full of hope. You don't need to go back to that life. I can arrange a senior executive position for you in the company. You'll have everything you deserve to have. It was a tempting offer. An easy path, a guarantee of material comfort, a stable life with the family I had always yearned for. A moment of hesitation flickered within me. But then, I looked at the uniform I was still wearing on my leave. It wasn't just clothes, it was a part of me. I can't, I said decisively. The military is where I was forged, where I was given honor and purpose when I had nothing. The man you see today, Major Ronan, was created there. I offered my own solution. A new plan was formed right then and there. I won't leave the military, but I will apply for a transfer to Fort Carson. Fort Carson, a large army base near Colorado Springs, was just a short drive from Denver. It was a perfect solution. I will apply myself through the proper channels. I continued. I want to come here as an officer assigned based on merit, not because my mother pulled strings. I've spent my whole life proving my worth, and I'm not going to stop now. Callista looked at me, her eyes teary but filled with pride and respect. She nodded. That was the moment I knew we had truly found each other. This relationship would be built on understanding and respect, not compensation. A few months later, I was in my military apartment in Washington, waiting for the transfer decision, when an unknown number called. The voice on the other end was Cressida, trembling and desperate, no longer with her usual arrogance. She said Cassian's business had gone bankrupt. Dashiell had accumulated a huge debt, and they were about to lose their house. She tried to bring up family loyalty and begged for my financial help. I listened in silence. I remembered the words. You were just a burden. There was no more anger, only a cold calm. This was the final test, the chance to close the past. I'm sorry to hear about your family's situation, I replied evenly. But that chapter of my life is closed. I can't help. Good luck. I hung up, without a moment of hesitation. On my 30th birthday, I received an official email. My transfer application to Fort Carson had been approved. That night, I made a video call. On the screen, Callista and Ansel, whom I had convinced to move to Denver to live with her, were singing happy birthday to me. Ansel's voice was a little off-key, and Callista gently nudged his arm, and they both burst into laughter. They were standing in a small rooftop garden created by Ansel himself. Behind them was the clear blue sky of Colorado. I smiled, a genuinely peaceful smile. I held up the transfer order for them to see. The compass was still in my jacket pocket, but now I didn't need it anymore. I had found my life's coordinates, a position on the military map, and an irreplaceable position in the heart of a real family. I didn't have to give up the person I had built. I had simply found a new home base to return to.